The landlord told her not to uncover the mirrors. She thought he was crazy, but after midnight, she found out why. It was an old building from the 1920s. The rooms were big and the ceilings were high, but the whole place felt like it was sinking into the mud. The walls were covered in peeling wallpaper, and everywhere there were cobwebs and dust. She was a young woman. She'd just finished university, and this was her first apartment. It wasn't much, but it was cheap. That's why she took it without even seeing it, just looking at the pictures online. Then, when she got there, she saw that every single mirror in the apartment was covered with a white sheet. There were mirrors everywhere, floor to ceiling, in the entryway, the bedroom, the bathroom, even the closet. She asked the landlord about it. He was an old man, thin and frail, with deep pockets under his eyes. He said it was his mother's condition. Apparently, she was so ashamed of her appearance that she spent her final years hiding in the apartment, refusing to look at herself in the mirrors. When she died, he put sheets over them to keep her memory alive. But she didn't believe him. She thought he was hiding something. But she was alone in the apartment now, and it was getting dark. So she lit some candles and went to bed. When she woke up, she felt something watching her. She turned off the lights and tried to ignore it, but she could feel its gaze boring into her back. Then she heard footsteps pacing outside her bedroom door. She pulled the covers over her head and tried to sleep, but the sound kept going. Tap, 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 tap. Finally, she couldn't take it anymore. She threw off the covers and walked toward the door. And that's when she saw it. On the other side of the white sheet, there was a pair of eyes staring at her. They were dark and soulless, like two bottomless pits. She screamed and stumbled backward. The eyes blinked and vanished. She rushed over to the mirror and tore the sheet off, but there was nothing there. Only her own terrified reflection stared back at her. That's when she noticed something strange about the glass. It wasn't smooth. If she traced her finger across it, she could feel all sorts of bumps, lumps and ridges. But she had never felt these before when she'd looked in the mirror. Why were they only visible now? As the days passed, the feeling of being watched intensified. At night she would hear scratching sounds coming from behind the walls. Sometimes she could hear whispering voices. Once she even thought she saw a shadow figure darting across her room. And every time she turned on the light, it disappeared. She was starting to feel desperate. She wanted to leave the apartment, but she was too scared to go outside at night. What if something followed her home? One day she went to the mall. She needed some new clothes, and maybe some fresh air would help lift her spirits. But while she was gone, something happened. She came home and reached for her doorknob. It was unlocked. She pushed open the door and gasped. In the bedroom, the white sheet had fallen off the mirror. The eyes were back, staring straight at her, but now there was another set of eyes on the other side of the room. She backed away, tripping over her rug. As she scrambled to her feet, another sheet fell to the floor, revealing yet another pair of eyes. They were everywhere. It was as if the apartment itself was watching her. She ran to the bathroom. Maybe in here she'd find a sanctuary, a place where she could lock herself in and be safe. But no, there in the mirror was another face staring back at her, pale and lifeless like a corpse. The face suddenly contorted into a horrifying smile. The girl screamed and fell to her knees. Her reflection smiled wider, revealing long, sharp teeth. Then it reached out a hand and beckoned to her. She scrambled backward, knocking over the trash can. The stench of rotten meat filled the air. The girl vomited onto the bathroom floor. In the distance, she could hear the sound of footsteps. Whoever or whatever was stalking her was getting closer. The sound of tapping grew louder, then right outside the bathroom door. She locked the door and leaned against it, trying to make herself small, hoping whatever was out there would pass by. But the tapping continued, slowly eating away at the wood. She could feel the vibrations through the floor, through the walls. Then suddenly, The doorknob began to turn. She cried out and slid down to the floor. The door opened and a draught blew through the room, extinguishing the candle and plunging her into darkness. She waited for what felt like hours. Finally, she gathered herself and crept to the door. She was shaking. She knew whatever was out there was still waiting for her. She moved the deadbolt and stepped outside. The hallway was empty. She let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. But as soon as she turned around, she saw them. There were dozens of eyes staring at her from behind the white sheets. They were grinning, sneering, some of them growling. She could hear their voices now, whispering and hissing. She spun around and ran down the hall, crashing into the wall at the end. She searched frantically for the door, bumping into things, falling over her own feet. Then she found it. She stumbled inside and slammed the door shut. She turned around and gasped. She was back in her bedroom. The scraping and tapping sounds were gone. The only sound was the pounding of her own heart. It had been a dream, she told herself, just a nightmare. But then she looked in the mirror, and that's when she saw it. Scratched into the glass was a message. It read, "Let me out." And then below it, she saw the date. It was today's date. The scratching must have happened while she was out at the mall. But how did they get the message to her? How was it even possible? Suddenly, she remembered the eyes on the other side of the mirror. She rushed to the bedroom. The eyes were still there. She ripped the sheet off. But when she looked into the mirror, she saw not her own reflection, but the girl from earlier. She was standing in the same spot as before, her arms outstretched, beckoning to her. Then she opened her mouth and screamed. And that's when the girl in the mirror lunged forward. The girl in the apartment screamed too. Then everything went black. When the girl in the apartment woke up, she was lying on the floor. The sheet had fallen off the mirror again. She could see her reflection, pale and bruised, her eyes wide with terror. Then the reflection smiled, a slow and sickening grin. The girl in the apartment screamed and tried to crawl away, but the reflection kept getting closer. It raised a hand and pressed its fingers against the glass. The girl in the apartment panicked. She tried to scramble out of the way, but it was too late. The reflection loomed over her, its eyes boring into hers. Then its lips moved, and a voice echoed in her mind. "You're mine now," it whispered. The last thing she remembered was the sound of shattering glass. After that, nothing. Weeks later, the landlord returned to check on the apartment. He was worried because the girl had stopped paying her rent. He let himself in with a key and stepped inside. He found the broken shards of glass on the floor and the missing sheet lying on the bed. His eyes fell on the mirror. It was covered once again in white. He stared at it for a moment, then reached out and slowly pulled the sheet aside. Behind it, two soulless eyes stared back at him. The landlord screamed and stumbled backward, knocking over a chair. But the eyes kept staring at him. They seemed to be beckoning, summoning him closer. He wanted to run, but his feet were rooted to the spot. The eyes blinked slowly, then a grin spread across the face. The landlord's scream echoed through the empty apartment. Then everything went black. "Hey, I'm back. Do you think the landlord is trapped in the mirror with the rest of them? Who do you think is behind all this? Let me know your theories in the comments. If you want to see more scary videos, stay tuned. We upload new stories every week. Thanks for watching. See you next time.